Hey, it's your guy Tyrrell back with the interviews. In today's video, we're going to briefly analyze Thomas Partey's midfield impact in Arsenal's narrow Emirates Cup victory over Monaco. So in today's video, first we're going to focus on Arsenal's attacking shape, then we'll shift to the one defensive issue that they encountered against Monaco, and lastly we'll focus on Thomas Partey's impact in that midfield zone. So when we break it all down and we do look at the board, we have Arsenal in a 4-3-3, and Monaco started the game in a 3-4-2-1. So when we break it down, first we'll focus on how Arsenal attacked and the issues that they encountered, along with the success that they did experience as well. So what we ended up seeing was that in terms of the attacking structure, the roles were pretty much similar, just different personnel. Nketiah was dropping deeper and looking to spin in towards the channels. Out in the wider areas, you didn't have Bukayo Saka on the right-hand side, it was Fabio Vieira. So that means that you didn't have a direct runner from that right flank. And he would often look to tuck into more central areas when he did receive the ball. And frankly, he struggled in that zone because he had to take a touch and he was looking to get across his marker. And that often saw him losing possession or being fouled. And then without a legitimate overlapping threat in Tomiyasu and Smith Rowe not making those consistent runs beyond the opposing side's wingback, Fabio Vieira was often left isolated on an island, and often when he got the ball in the final third, his deliveries were underwhelming and he failed to make an impact in the final third. In the early stages of that match, it looked like Smith Rowe was going to have an impactful game in the final third, as Monaco dropped off in a 5-4-1, and Smith Rowe was consistently receiving the ball in pockets of space between the lines. But similar to Fabio Vieira, when he did receive the ball in that zone, if it wasn't a square pass towards Vieira or the wide area, he struggled to have an impact with his final ball in towards the opposing side's penalty area. Therefore, when we shift to the left-hand side, Timber was often shifting in towards that midfield zone and making up a 3-2-5, and we often saw Rice looking to receive the ball on the outside of the opposing side's midfield bank in that left half space, and he was providing cover for Martinelli, who was hugging the touchline. In these situations, there were times where Rice would push forward, and if Timber was in a more wider position, then you would see Rice in between the lines looking to receive the ball in that zone as well. But in comparison to the right hand side, there were moments where we saw more of a promising combination between Rice and Martinelli, as Martinelli struggled in 1v1s against the opposing side's wing back and right center back. But it was when he was in those 1v2s and Rice made overlapping runs that they were able to combine on two separate occasions, and from those situations it was Rice's overlapping or underlapping runs that allowed Martinelli to play the ball in towards him, and from those zones Rice provided two quality deliveries, one through the 6-yard area and the other one was towards the back post. But in both situations, Rice's teammates failed to connect with his deliveries, and when they did, they struggled to test the goalkeeper. On the other hand, out of possession, Arsenal also encountered issues. A lot of it stemmed from the lack of intensity from their pressing, but in terms of their pressing, the issue that they had was that against this Monaco side, they were getting overloaded in that midfield zone as Monaco presented the box midfield, and it made it a 4v3 in that area. Because when you look at how Arsenal were attempting to press, they had their front three closing down the fullbacks, and then in that midfield zone, technically it should have been potentially 3v2, but what ended up happening was that the two attacking midfielders behind Ben Yedder were dropping off into that midfield zone, and when you would have Smith Rowe and Rice stepping forward to close down Kamara and Fofana, it was the attacking players that were dropping off deeper, so that would leave Thomas Partey to close down one of the attacking midfielders if they drop deeper. What ended up happening was that initially that was the case, but then Golovin looked to drop off deeper into that midfield zone as well, and when Thomas Partey would shift towards him to close him down, there would be a spare midfielder in that zone, and the way that Arsenal could eradicate that threat was by simply having one of the center backs stepping tight towards the spare attacking midfielder to close him down, or you could have one of the wide attacking players shifting in narrow, but because they were closing down the front three, this called for a job of the center back to step forward to close down the spare midfielder. That wasn't the case because they were both sticking near Ben Yedder to ensure that he wasn't 1v1, and then the fullbacks couldn't push forward because the Monaco wingbacks were pushing higher up the pitch and pegging them back. So frankly, on a few occasions, more so Monaco's best chances when they bypassed that Arsenal press stem from this 4v3 overload, and you can consistently see one of the attacking midfielders and sometimes even the holding midfielders receiving the ball freely, and then from there you'd see Smith Rowe, Thomas Partey, and Declan Rice caught out of position. However, the main focus here was Thomas Partey's play in that midfield zone. If you look at Arsenal's last few games against Man United and Barcelona, you witnessed that both sides looked to man v man mark them across the pitch and did a very effective job of pressing them out of the game. United did a very good job of limiting Declan Rice's impacts by having Sancho and Bruno sticking towards him, both taking turns and at times blocking off the passing lane in towards him. The same thing applied against Barcelona, where Thomas Partey started in that position, and what you ended up witnessing was that it was Gundogan who was stepping forward to close him down, and they had 3v3 in that midfield zone with Oriol Romeu and Pedri joining the press as well. If it wasn't Gundogan closing down Thomas Partey, it was Pedri stepping forward to apply pressure to ensure that he couldn't get on the ball. But what ended up happening was that on the rare occasion where Thomas Partey was able to receive the ball freely, unlike Declan Rice on a consistent basis against United, Thomas Partey was able to play penetrative passes between the midfield bank and find teammates in the final third. And unlike Barcelona and Man United, Monaco didn't apply an aggressive, energetic press in that midfield area, and that allowed Thomas Partey more time on the ball. And what ended up happening was that when he received the ball in that zone, one of two things occurred. He was able to have the time to locate Smith Rowe in that pocket of space between the lines and bypass that midfield bank of four to play an attacking player in towards that area, and from there they would often play a safe pass out into the wider areas, or they simply failed to provide the final ball in behind or in around the opposing side's penalty area. The other element to Thomas Partey's strengths in this game was that when he did receive the ball in the midfield zone, he was capable of evading pressure and carrying the ball out of his own half, and then from there he would either look to play a pass in behind to allow a teammate to break forward, or at the very least he was playing a teammate in towards a legitimate goal scoring position in the final third, placing them in a position where they could create for a teammate or simply create their own shot. In this example, you witness Saliba splitting Golovin and Ben Yedder for Thomas Partey, and when Partey receives the ball, he opens up his body and he shields it away from Ben Yedder pressing from behind, and while it does look like he's going to play it towards Smith Rowe, he carries the ball across Golovin's pressure, he takes away another midfielder, and then he slides the ball across the wing back for Fabio Vieira. And then if we look to another example, it's Thomas Partey receiving a loose ball in the midfield zone. He carries it across Golovin's sliding challenge, and then he locates Timber running off a marker, and what he ends up doing is that he locates the gap between the two center backs, splits them both to play Timber beyond the left center back, and that places Timber in a position where he could carry the ball towards the edge of the box, and he locates Nketiah's run towards the back post as he breaks late, but the pass is slightly underhit and Monaco is able to clear their line. So as you can see, given several personnel changes to the starting 11, this was far from a perfect Arsenal display out of possession, but Thomas Partey's ability to evade pressure in midfield while bypassing that zone with penetrative passes served as a key component